Hello and welcome. I'm Rashawn Gidwani and you're watching the World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines for this hour. The Lebanese president emphasizes that a complete Israeli retreat from disputed border regions remains the absolute focus of his administration. The government maintains that peace is impossible until all sovereign territories are fully liberated. Tehran announces that the current standing ceasefire agreement faces an immediate threat of total collapse due to repeated compliance violations. The Iranian government is ready to officially cancel the deal if promises are not met. Police forces forcefully eject opposition party members from their Ankara headquarters as the government clamps down on political dissent. This dramatic confrontation escalates the ongoing constitutional crisis. The Chinese technology giant unveils a revolutionary semiconductor design capability that marks a significant leap forward for domestic manufacturing. This internal development directly defies the stringent export controls and sanctions imposed by the United States. Marco Rubio issues a critical comment stating how India did not express concerns over Pakistan acting as a mediator in the US-Iran conflict. He went on to add that New Delhi's primary concerns with Islamabad continue to center on terrorist groups operating in Pakistan. Multiple massive cargo vessels carrying valuable Middle East oil and LNG decide to safely exit the volatile Hormuz Strait. These strategic tankers immediately route across the Indian Ocean as they head for debarkation ports in Pakistan and China. Taiwan officials openly declare that a potential conversation with President Trump represents a highly positive diplomatic signal. The ministry simultaneously clarifies that absolutely no formal planning talks have taken place between the two sides just yet. The Chinese space program successfully sends a veteran astronaut into orbit on an unprecedented year-long stay aboard their station. The marathon mission serves as a crucial stepping stone as the nation intensely eyes a crewed moon landing by the year 2030. And now we have some breaking news coming in with regards to the Lebanon strikes. Southern Lebanon is once again soaked in blood as Israeli drone strikes target vehicles on busy roads in the Nabateye region, killing 3 people in cold blood. Lebanese officials have confirmed that 3 separate Israeli drone attacks on vehicles traveling on the Kafr Raman-Jarmak highway and the Jarmak-Kardali road in Nabateye have claimed 3 lives in the latest round of violence to shatter the fragile ceasefire. The strikes targeting cars on civilian roads in broad daylight are the latest in an unrelenting pattern of Israeli attacks on southern Lebanon that has now claimed more than 3,000 lives since March 2nd. Earlier this month, a Lebanese soldier and several members of his family were killed in an Israeli air raid targeting their home in Kafr Raman in the Nabateye district, with the Lebanese army describing the attack as a direct strike on a residential property. And now we have more breaking news coming in with regards to the Israeli army. The Israeli army has threatened the residents of 10 villages in southern Lebanon's Nabateye and Jazin areas to leave their homes before imminent strikes. The military's Arabic language spokesperson, Avichai Adrei, wrote in a post on X that the threat applied to residents of Al-Nabateye, Al-Tata, Al-Louise, Sajid, Ain Kana, Haruf, Zibdin, Kafar Rahman, Al-Duvair, Adshit Al-Shakif, and Maydun. And now we have some news with regards to Israel and Lebanon. The Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has issued a statement marking Resistance and Liberation Day, commemorating the year 2000 when Israel ended its 22-year occupation of southern Lebanon. In his message, Aoun said this year's observance comes amid what he described as continued Israeli presence in some southern Lebanese villages and ongoing deadly attacks. He emphasized that the path towards a complete Israeli withdrawal remains a national priority for Lebanon and should be pursued through negotiations. Aoun added that such negotiations would not represent concessions, but rather a reaffirmation of Lebanon's sovereignty and its right to defend its territory through its armed forces. Now, we do have a guest joining us, Xavier Abu Eid, a political scientist and Middle East expert, joining us from Ramallah. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. With regards to Aoun's message and, of course, the fact that the path towards a complete Israeli withdrawal remains a national priority, how do you feel that this will be made possible?
First of all, he's not asking as a president of Lebanon for anything that it's illegal or it's against what the international community could support or not. What's very problematic, though, is that Israel has been allowed to continue killing thousands of Lebanese using the same toolkits that they have in Gaza, i.e., targeting even schools or mosques or churches or medical personnel. And absolutely nothing happens to Israel with regards to accountability. So you have a government in Lebanon which is relatively weak compared to the situation we have overall, but they are stating a matter of unity for all Lebanese, which is the right that the Lebanese people have to self-determination and liberation within all of their territory. And the fact that Israel continues to occupy Lebanese territory and it's not giving any sort of real signs that they are going to be withdrawing. Israel is setting new positions in Lebanon, and let's never forget that this year is an electoral year in Israel, and there are Israeli politicians, members of the current government coalition, that are campaigning over an agenda that includes setting colonial settler outposts in Lebanese territory.
Right. So essentially what you're saying is that, yes, with regards to what Joseph Aoun has mentioned, that through some negotiations this can be made possible. But of course, there still is the threat of Hezbollah, which essentially threatens Israel in the sense that Israel will continue attacks if Hezbollah is still around. What is your suggestion on whether or not this can be resolved?
I think your assumption is not factual. In fact, before Hezbollah conducted an attack on Israel with regard after the Israeli assassination of Ayatollah Khomeini, which is an attack that many people in Lebanon did not agree with, Israel had violated the ceasefire with Lebanon 15,000 times, according to the United Nations. So it's not Hezbollah that was the one who initiated. It's Israel that remains an occupying power on Lebanese territory. So I think it's very important to start setting aside those lines as if Israel is a victim here. Israel is the occupying power on 3 countries in the region, Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon, systematically violates international law, and is not going anywhere so far with regard to respecting its obligations and withdrawing from occupied territory. Now, I did not say that this is going to be solved through some sort of negotiations, because Israel does not have incentives to stop being an occupying power. We need a strong international engagement, understanding the danger that for the whole region and beyond, we have having an Israeli government which is full of extremism, supported by the US administration so far granting impunity, and not endorsing international law as a common base in order to solve the regional issues.
Right. Now, as far as the international engagement is concerned, what exactly did you have in mind?
Well, there are several tools that the international community can take regarding a situation like this. And this is not only about Israel, it's about anyone that's violating their international obligations. There are sanctions that can be imposed that you can actually push, for example, for an international conference immediately in order to end the situation there. The feeling I get, though, is that the Trump administration is not allowing a broader international engagement. Let's remember that there are other countries that have interests in Lebanon, particularly in the case of France, and there is a regional bloc led by Saudi Arabia, by also including countries like Jordan, like Qatar, that are increasingly calling upon the U.S. to stop this situation of belligerence in the region. It's not only about Lebanon. Let's remember that Lebanon is one of the issues being discussed on the ceasefire negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. And therefore, when we are talking about the Lebanese situation, just like the Palestinian situation and just like the Syrian situation, we are talking not just about a bilateral issue between Israel, the occupying power, and the respective country. We're talking about matters of regional security that Israel continues to threaten.
Right. Sir, please stay with us. We'll be right back with you shortly. Now we have some breaking news coming in with regards to Israeli attacks. The houses were destroyed in the Israeli attack in Arzoon, a town in southern Lebanon's Tyre area, the national news agency says. The agency added that rescue teams were on site to evacuate the injured. And now, next up, we have some news coming out of Iran and the U.S. peace deal, which is now teetering on the brink, and Tehran is issuing a stark and sobering warning to the world. Iran has declared that a possible truce agreement under discussion with the United States could still collapse, and is pointing the finger directly at Washington as the obstacle standing in the way of peace. Iran has said that unresolved disagreements over the unfreezing of Iranian funds remain a major and potentially fatal sticking point in the negotiations. Iran has added that U.S. obstruction of some clauses of the agreement, including the issue of releasing Iran's blocked assets, still continues, and there is still a possibility that the agreement may be canceled. The warning comes just 24 hours after President Trump himself declared that a peace deal had been largely negotiated, while the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that there was a solid framework on the table. However, Iran is making clear that nothing is signed, nothing is certain, and that Washington's refusal to unblock Iranian assets running into tens of billions of dollars could sink the entire process. Now joining us once more is Xavier Abu-Eid, political scientist and Middle East expert, joining us live from Ramallah. Sir, with regards to the development that I just reported on, essentially with this deal and Iranian assets not being given up by the United States of America, do you believe that we are now on the precipice of more attacks or more negotiations? Sir, are you there?
Negotiations.
Oh, right. Yes, please continue.
No, it may be a bit of both. I'm saying, because you can actually have negotiations while they will continue to be fighting, and this is something that already happened. This is not a war. It's not a conflict that was supposed to exist. There was an Omani mediation that was getting a number of elements out of Iran, including a commitment not to have nuclear weapons and turning enriched uranium into gasoline, and other elements that according to the Omani foreign minister, right before, 24 hours before the Israel-US attack on Iran, he said that he could get an agreement within 24 hours and implementation of the agreement totally within something like 3 months. Now, Israel pushed the U.S. to attack, even against the will of several U.S. officials that were not convinced by the arguments of Benjamin Netanyahu, a politician that we have to remember has been campaigning for the past 30 years for this attack on Iran, just like he campaigned for the attack on Iraq. And you know the consequences that this from an perspective, but from a political perspective, it's a problem for everyone. From one side, President Trump wants to show that he can come out victorious, but he has not been able to defeat Iran. And from the other side, Iran is trying to gain something else than what they had before the joint Israeli-US attack.
Right. So essentially, what you're saying is that yes, both of these things, negotiations and attacks, can happen simultaneously. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I essentially got from your last report there was a suggestion that when it comes down to politics on the whole, essentially with President Donald Trump and the IRGC or Iran, do you believe that both of these sides are also struggling to essentially prove who is the greater nation as far as their egos are concerned? Is that what you're alluding to?
I think the ego issue goes way more on the US side. I think Iran understands much better what geography means, and they understand much better that they need to get to an agreement with the region. And that's why they have been trying to push some sort of diplomacy particularly with Arab countries in the region. There has been a strong presence, not just in the case of Pakistan that you have been talking about in your reports, but also with regard to the role of Qatar on one side, also the role of Turkey, which is not an Arab country, but a very important country in the region. So they understand, all of them, that there is a need for regional stability. Saudi Arabia has been also playing an important role. And let's not forget the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran through China, not through the US, only a few years ago. But once again, this is a war that has led the world to an oil crisis, an economic crisis in many cases. And once again, a war that even people in the US are not justifying. People in the US consider this to be a very unjustifiable war. In a year that you have World Cup, you're coming in the US to the midterm elections, the Football World Cup, and the midterm elections, and President Trump will be asked to have some answer that so far, in absence of an agreement, because he will not be able to defeat Iran militarily, it will be very difficult for him to answer.
Right. Sir, thank you so much for your time. We'll speak soon as we have more developments. Now, next up, we have some news coming out of Turkey. Tensions have erupted in Turkey after riot police fired tear gas and stormed the headquarters of the main opposition Republican People's Party, or CHP, in Ankara. Police forced their way into the building to evict the party's ousted leadership after a court annulled the results of the CHP's 2023 party congress, which had elected Özgür Özel as party leader. Clouds of tear gas filled the building as people inside shouted and threw objects at the entrance while police broke through makeshift barricades. No injuries were reported during the operation. The court has reinstated former CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who lost to President Tayyip Erdogan in the 2023 presidential election. The developments have raised fresh concerns over the state of democracy in NATO member Turkey, with analysts warning the move could further strengthen Erdogan's more than two-decade rule. Financial markets also reacted sharply, with investor concerns over democratic backsliding causing market volatility earlier this week. Let's listen in to ousted CHP leader Özgür Özel and CHP Member of Parliament Ali Mahir Basarir.
Ocağı işgal olmasın diye baba ocağı kime emanetse üyeden, delegeden onun dışında birinin eli değmesin diye oraya canını siper edenlere selam olsun hepinize.
Atanmış hakimlerin verdiği kararla maalesef ki bugün makamından, koltuğundan edildi. Ama dünyaya, Türkiye'ye Toman'ın üzerinden verdiği resim şunu anlatıyor. Direnenler kazanacak, direnenler kazanır.
Now we have some news coming out of China as far as their technology manufacturing capabilities are concerned. China's Huawei is firing a direct shot across the bow of Washington's semiconductor strategy, and the implications for the global tech war are enormous. Huawei Technologies has announced that it expects to design high-end chips by 2031 with transistor density equivalent to 1.4 nanometer processes, despite U.S. sanctions that have made it extremely difficult for China to build the world's most advanced semiconductors. The projection is the centerpiece of what Huawei is calling the Tau scaling law, a new principle for improving chips, as the industry can no longer rely mainly on making transistors smaller, introduced by Huawei semiconductor chief He Jingbo in a keynote speech at the 2026 IEEE International Symposium on Circuits and Systems in Shanghai. The target is significant because 1.4 nanometers is expected to be close to the global frontier for advanced chip making around the end of the decade, putting Huawei on a potential collision course with the world's most advanced chip makers, including Taiwan's TSMC and South Korea's Samsung. Huawei has said its Kirin chips are scheduled to launch in fall 2026, and they will be the first to use a related architecture called logic folding, which shortens wiring inside chips and considerably improves performance. Huawei has added that it has already designed and mass-produced 381 chips over the past 6 years based on the Tau scaling law for use in smartphones and AI computing. Now joining us live to tell us more is Mitali Nikor, an economist from New Delhi. Ms. Nikor, thanks so much for joining us. There's lots to discuss here. Let's dive right in. Do you believe that, one, this is essentially going to upset the United States of America as far as their sanctions are concerned? What more can you tell us?
No, absolutely. I completely agree that, this is a breakthrough achievement in a way. And it also comes on the back of a very interesting summit that was held between the US and China just recently, which also involved the CEO of NVIDIA, Elon Musk, and so many others actually traveling down to to Beijing and having this sort of discussion. So it's a very interesting timing of this announcement, and it's also very interesting situation where here is a competitor to Nvidia at a global scale. It remains to be seen how many companies around the world. I mean, I am quite sure that American corporations will not use this chip, but surely the dependence of China on American tech reduces because of this announcement.
Essentially, what comes to my mind is when we think of how companies essentially get their products into the hands of consumers. Let's hypothetically choose Apple, for example. Great marketing campaigns, celebrity endorsements. So, of course, consumers are going to use those products. You mentioned NVIDIA there, and then, of course, NVIDIA being a competitor to Huawei. Can you tell me more about Jensen Huang's visit with Trump and how that essentially led or will lead potentially to more sales of NVIDIA capabilities as far as technological capabilities are concerned and their assets, and why Huawei might not essentially have that strength as far as marketing and advertising is concerned, or why American companies may not use them? Is there a direct correlation then in the way leaders of companies essentially drive sales like that?
So it's very interesting, because if you look at NVIDIA's business model, first of all, it's not about making sales, that's not how they make their money. They make their money through equity transactions. They make their money through investments in AI companies. Even today, NVIDIA owns large stakes in OpenAI. It also has an investment in Anthropic. It also has investments in Google. So it's very interesting. Regardless of who wins the AI race, NVIDIA will always win the AI race when it comes to the American companies. Now, where is it that NVIDIA hasn't been allowed to invest? It's in Chinese companies. And that's exactly what they want. I mean, they want to back not just one horse, they want to back all the horses because that's how they will come out in front. And that's probably the reason why we saw someone like Jensen Huang, be a part of the president's delegation. It's also interesting that he hasn't actually played on his ethnic identity. He's played much more on his American identity so far. But as we see Huawei growing, we might even see him talking about more of his ethnic identity and getting closer to the Chinese side. You never know. So very honestly, I think that here Huawei is actually seeking to compete with him. The Chinese government government is also wary of Nvidia coming in, an American corporation, and taking stakes in their AI companies, especially when the countries are viewing this as national races and not actually as companies competing against each other. And I
Right.
think this is where the real game lies.
Right. Very interesting insights as always, Ms. Nakor. We'll speak soon as we have more developments. Thank you very much. Next up, we now have some breaking news with regards to Pakistan and China. Pakistan's Army Chief General Asim Munir is in Beijing alongside Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, meeting with Chinese leaders. The significance of Munir's presence in Beijing cannot be overstated. Just days ago, he was in Tehran alongside Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi, delivering messages directly to Iran's leadership as part of ongoing mediation efforts to formally end the three-month war. Munir is briefing Beijing, and the message Beijing is sending back is equally significant. China has publicly stated it will work with Pakistan to make positive contributions to the early restoration of peace and stability in the Middle East. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Rashan Gidwani, and you're watching The World Report. Let's take